Our first story is Placide's Wife. I got this from Weird Vampire Tales. Um, in Kirk, it's written by Kirk Mashburn, called Placide's Wife. A vampire woman counts on the loneliness of laborers in the Louisiana bayous to help her gain access to their camp. Now, back before movie studios struck box office gold by mixing up audience drawing power more than one monster in films, like what they have, Dracula meets Frankenstein and Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, all those things. Weird fiction writers thrilled readers with stories that supported the existence of an abundance of supernatural creatures. In this 1931 story, Placide's Wife, Kirk Mashburn pitted men in the Louisiana bayous against both werewolves and vampires. Ooh. The tale proved popular enough with Weird Tale readers to generate a standalone sequel, The Last of Placide's Wife, which we will be presenting at 9 p.m. following our feature story presentation. Told you I'd say that all over again. I knew I would. And now, drum roll, please. Placide's Wife. From the depths of the dank, moss-festooned woods, a long-drawn howl quavered upward to a cloaked and sullied moon. There was a sinister, unearthly quality about that ululation that set it apart from the orthodox lament of any random mournful hound. It startled us, gathered there in the temporary shack that served the road-building crew for office and commissary combined. The dull buzz of conversation stilled for a long minute. I saw more than one stolid Cajun farmer, road builder pro tem, furtively sign the cross. Chairs and packing boxes croaked under the sudden uneasy shifting of their burdens. Placide's wife, Placide's wife, Placide's wife, I heard someone's perturbed mutter. It was old Landry that I heard, gnarled and seamed and squat of body, ordinarily taciturn and to the point of sourness. A half-dozen pairs of eyes flashed distrustfully in my direction, then settled in common focus upon the speaker. The rebuke and its intimation were plain. I was a state highway department engineer in 1931. I was an alien in their midst, and whatever old Landry had meant, it was one of those many things ranging from the utterly trivial to the supremely tragic, of which no discussion is had with strangers such as I. If one be a French-descended Cajun of the southwestern Louisiana parishes, suspicious of all unproved folk, well, then one did not speak haphazardly concerning obscure local matters with such as I. Landry withdrew even more deeply into his shell of taciturnity. There was an ineffectual attempt or two to resume talk, but a damper seemed to have been put upon any further desire for conversation. In twos and threes, but never singly, the members of the group drifted away to their bunks in close succession. I was left alone with Delacroix, the young commissary clerk and timekeeper for the road gang. So, what was there about what the old man said to sour the balance of them so thoroughly? My companion hesitated without replying. He was of the locality, and even though a finer breed than the teamsters and laborers of the crew, he possessed in a less degree some of their instinctive clannishness. Still, when one is working one's way through engineering school of the state university, there's evidence therein of quality superior to the inhibitions of simplicity. Delacroix just shrugged at me. There's a story behind it, he admitted. Well, tell it to me, I urged. It was still too early for bed. Once more, before he could comply, that weird letration from the forest set the night aquiver. We listened in silence until it ended. So, observed Delacroix. Then he told me of one Placide, and of Placide's wife. And this, my friends, is the substance of his story. Placide Dubois, said Delacroix, spent 30 of his nearly 50 years of life peacefully upon one patch of bayou land. His paunch was kept satisfactorily heavy with beans and with rice, which he grew more by the kindness of heaven than any great exertion of his own. Sometimes he wheezed down the bayou in an ancient oyster boat, with the running of which the indulgence of Providence may also have had a hand, judging by the neglected condition of its decrepit engine. In the bay, Placide caught shrimps. In the winter, he sporadically trapped muskrats and shot ducks. But the ducks weren't hurt. They just were, shot. And, well, anyway. Always he had enough black perique for his pipe and a little wine to wash down his food. Rarely he would go to town and get very drunk. For a man with no wants beyond his creature comforts and a masterless, indolent existence, it was a good life. Then the time came when oil was found in the neighborhood of Placide's quarter section, and he sold the ground that he had homesteaded 30 years before for more money than Placide had any business with. Some people said he got $10,000. The highest estimate placed the amount at 5 times that much. At any rate, it was enough to be Placide's undoing. He moved to town. Now, La Branche is a village to you, or even to me, a sleepy town of some 3,000 souls, but to this old one it was a veritable city. Not that it made any difference. Placide could loaf as well as, or even better, in the town than on the bayou, and he held on to his money with tight fingers. Placide loafed too well. Not content with a full belly and freedom, and with no more burden upon his shoulders than holding fast to the wealth with which accident had endowed him, he had so much time in his hands, in fact, that he filled it by marrying a woman out of a visiting carnival troupe. If I had a nickel. Having lived womanless for nearly 50 years, this stupid one, this great clod, must marry a gypsy-looking wench from a street fair, a snake charmer. Hey! True. She was young, more than good to look at, so they say, with her olive skin and black hair and dark, inviting eyes that turned upward a little at the corners. Nita, her name was. And both the women of La Branche snubbed her for the memory of her snakes and for marrying old lazy Placide for his money. Oh, it had to be his money, no? The men were friendly enough to her, behind their women's backs. Yea, too friendly indeed. Placide, seeing his wife's flirtations, stolidly packed her off to another shack or another bayou where oil had not as yet been found, and where there were fewer men for her to dally with, treating her harshly when she rebelled. He had a certain respect for his own rights, Placide. And so this Nita, she ate red beans and rice and was lucky to have a pair of shoes. You've heard it said that the way to keep a woman virtuous is to keep her barefooted. Well, and all the time Placide's money rotted wherever it was buried in the ground. No banks for that one. And this Nita, having sold herself to Placide and been cheated of her purchase price, soured inside herself, I think, hating Placide more with each dull day. Her only companion was a great black cat that had come with her to La Branche, along with the snakes. Only, one supposes, Placide had objected to the snakes if they did not belong to the carnival anyway. Now, this cat of Nita's, it had yellow eyes, out of which it glared hate at all the world except its mistress. The cat hated Placide more even than Nita did. It would stare at him for minutes on end, its eyes smoldering. Or sometimes would arch its back and yowl at him like a fiend. The cat would spit also, at Henry Laborde and a few of the others who sometimes hunted or fished with Placide. That cat had scratched Laborde for no reason whatsoever. So Laborde, not liking this and not liking cats at all, and this one even less, gabbled at Placide to kill the célibataire noir. Placide, he liked the idea, so he shoots the cat. That is, Laborde swears to this day that he did. He shot it. He shot that cat at least a dozen times, loading and reloading his shotgun. Placide was a crack shot, you comprehend? And he grew angrier and more determined with each belch of the gun. He did not like to miss, especially this cat. Finally, Placide begins to be afraid he's not missing, although the buckshot does not kill the beast, nor even seem to hurt it. Placide, this is very superstitious. Probably his hand trembles, and he tells Laborde, "Célibataire noir, dirty black beast." They look at each other. One pictures them. They look back at the cat. The cat is gone, disappeared. Afterward, Laborde admits they let it alone, and they signed the cross whenever it came near, which Henry says the cat did not like and would go yowling and spitting away. Well, so only Nita loved this cat. And the cat, he loved Nita. And both them hated Placide. As for him, this dumb Placide, he grew more sullen and suspicious than ever, without knowing exactly why, but went about his dull affairs as usual. Sometimes he still rattled down to the bay to catch the shrimps. That meant a day and a part out of the night, away from home, even if the engine in his boat gave no troubles. which was not always nor even often. Now on one such a day, a vagabond gypsy peddler drove his wagon along the bayou and stopped eventually at Placide's house. Now this peddler was a bright-eyed ruffian with dark hair flowing over his forehead, not unhandsome in a sly, evil way. Pierre Abadie, who passed Placide's shanty twice during the day, and stopped once to ask for matches to light his pipe. And he said that Nita and the peddler, they spoke together in a strange, outlandish tongue, neither French nor English. The peddler's horse was unharnessed and grazed about the place all through that day. Now this Placide, he heard of it, and so he treated Nita very harshly that night, naturally. The peddler set up a tent outside La Branche, and he mended pots and pans without a doubt engaged in other less open practices. He seemed unconcerned once when Placide came by and stopped for a moment in front of the tent, saying nothing, but glowering sullenly. And so, after a bit, Placide went on to the shack where Yellow Marie sold the vile bootleg whiskey and hatched viler schemes in her festering old brain. This Marie, if she had any other name none knew nor cared, was a quadroon. That's 1/4 black. She was a quadroon woman who had lived in a tumble-down hovel on the fringe of town for as long as most people remember. Some of the oldest inhabitants say they said that she had once been a wildly beautiful creature, such as a sleek, cruel yellow tigress is beautiful. But now she was a wrinkled old hag, a dispenser of vicious liquor and mouldy cheese, a procuress when chance offered. And so everyone whispered, a witch. The people of the Branch would like to have packed her off elsewhere, but there she was. The sheriff, among others, was one of those old men who had memories of Marie's golden days. You comprehend? Then, too, this Marie was clever, discreet. You understand? Nobody knew anything against her except rumors. Nobody, that is, who cared to tell. And so Marie stayed on. Now the old hag, who had no love for Placide, and he had less for her, but this one, she had the liquor that was as cheap as it was powerful. And the other had a thirst which was a perpetual regard for economy, required to be quenched with as little expense as might be. Now Placide, he ordinarily drank almost not at all him, except reasonably of wine with his supper. But on this day, you see, he had quarrelled again with Nita, and he was very harsh to her. But even half senseless, she was still stronger of the two, and his sullen spirits needed further outlet. Now you have noticed, have you not, how very little thing can set in train a whole series of events? Well, a little thing it was for Placide. That tight-fisted should unreasonably insist upon old Marie taking drink for drink with him of her corrosive whiskey. Even though Placide paid for it, it was almost as unreasonable for Marie to accept, knowing as she did the truth about what it was she dispensed. What greed for money will do, and many times remarked that it's not a good thing, this greed. And so Placide and this Yellow Marie, they drank together. And after a while, Placide's sullen tongue loosened enough to where he growled of his wife to the yellow woman. That was not a good thing either. But then, what to expect, it being Placide? Now Marie, being a she-devil sober, or the more malicious she-devil in liquor, she twitted him about the peddler and his suspicions of Nita, even in the healing of the other customers who sought her aid in poisoning themselves. Hey, why don't she leave you? That's all I don't understand, jibed the old hag, in Cajun English like Placide's own. Oh, says Placide, speaking in the reasonably pure French of his father. She hopes to find the money what I've buried in the ground. But she's not going to find it, I can tell you that. That's buried, hidden, nobody find it. There, money in the ground. Hidden was it. Marie was all in the ears now. Her eyes glittered like a spider's watching a fly. Money in the ground, indeed. She attempted to draw more from Placide, but her eagerness betrayed itself, and he shut up like one of those oysters, suspicious. Now Placide, him, had right to be suspicious. Before he caught her the very next day prowling around the woods near his cabin on the bayou. Marie, she was peering carefully at the ground, scratching and probing here and there with the paw she carried. Now Placide had been dully angry because he thought the peddler wanted his woman. But this Marie was after his money, and that was something else altogether. There's a Charlie Daniels song about something like this. The peddler, he got glares and sullen maledictions. But Marie, she got worse. Almost Placide killing her. And she was just able after a long time to drag herself back toward town as far as the peddler's tent. Now the peddler, him helped her as well as he could, while the hag cursed Placide all his works, and after a while she quieted and talked long and earnestly with the gypsy, who listened more attentively as her talk went on. Now doubtless Marie knew, as do all of those who have a hand in such matters, that curses and spells and glee charms work much better when the victim knows about it. Maybe they would not work at all otherwise. She knew that Placide was very superstitious him, so she was careful that it came to Placide's ears that she was going to put a conjure upon him, put a conjure on him, and it would be better for him to dig up his money and leave the parish. Now Nita, of course, would tell the peddler in case her man took the word into heart. She would know when Placide dug up his money. Afterwards, you speculate on the ending for yourself, A queer thing is that Marie must have believed in her own gree charm, especially as the peddler doubled it with a dreadful spell of his own. Doubtless they both believed in it, and it may be that they were right, only it may also be that they meddled with much more dangerous things than even they knew, Marie especially. What the peddler thought or knew, only he could have told. At any rate, they did more than threaten Placide with a spell. They went about it seriously. No. Much of my story has to be surmised, and the gaps filled in between the fragments of known fact, which are fewer than they might be. But these people around here tell the whole story, and they tell it all with the sureness of that comes from believing what one wishes to believe. Very well. That is the way I'm telling it to you now. And one thing is known. This peddler bought a charm at Jules Froissart's store in La Blanche, which was afterwards seen in Placide's cabin. Froissart remembered it by its general shape and design, particularly because there was a little end of the end broken off of it. The peddler got it cheaply for that reason, you see. Now the charm, later seen in Placide's shanty, had this same shortened bit, but it had been painted black and changed in other ways. And there was a little red bag tied around it. That was Marie, Yeah, certainly. It was full of queer charms to make a spell on Placide. Glee. Well, the peddler carried it to the Placide's woman, and one supposes that they had plotted much together. One believes that maybe the peddler wanted Nita as much as he wanted Placide's money. It may be that Nita, desired the peddler too. And then, afterward, the woman put the charm under her bed. That's where she made the mistake. Placide had heard of the plot to put a spell upon him. Only that day, and he was both angry and afraid. He'd gone into Marie's place, but he had found her absent, and the dive closed, which may have been well for Marie. At the peddler's tent, Placide found the gypsy sitting cross-legged on the ground, elaborately whetting an edge upon a most ferocious-looking butcher knife. And so Placide, not unreasonably, left the peddler at peace until he went back and got his gun, or at least until he could deal with him on more even terms. On the way back to his cabin, Placide drank from a flask that he carried. Meeting with Henry Laborde, he would have given Henry a drink, but the bottle was empty. So Henry must come to Placide's cabin, where there was a whole demijohn of good wine waiting to be drunk. It was not far off. They would get drunk together. At the cabin, Placide reached under the bed for the demijohn, felt something else, and brought out that glee charm. Now, as they say, Placide was superstitious. Maybe reasonably, maybe not. And the gris, he understood that quite well, and he went mad. The body says he seized Nita as one might take a 10-pound sack of flour and flung her hard to the floor. He was a bull for strength, Placide. And then, while she lay stunned on the floor, Placide flung the charm full at her smooth throat. Now the charm, as we had said, was flat and thin. Its ends were flattened and beat into design, something like a wedge-shaped clover leaf, this charm. With Placide's great strength and behind it, it's no wonder that it tore deep into Nita's round throat, where it stood upright. It wobbled drunkenly, sickening the body. While Nita, she quivered and twitched for a few moments. And then Nita was still, still, and the blood welled slowly from the wound, impeded by the instrument what caused it. And then that great black cat bounded out of a corner, leaping over the body of its mistress, as if to attack Placide. The beast thought better of it, perhaps. At any rate, it turned back to sit upon the woman's breast. The body says it sat there and howled, or its yellow eyes blazed red fire. Then the monster crept upward to Nita's throat. And that great monstrous beast, it licked away the dark blood, after which it started yowling with more energy. Now all this, you understand, in just a very few minutes, while that stupid little body stood there, one assumes, with his slack mouth hanging open wider than even the usual. Both men looked long at the body of the woman. That was all. They just looked. And then the body began to look at Placide, too. Sideways, like that. Placide, he began to worry. Well, it was time for him to worry, one comprehends. Now what you going to do, Placide? The body wants to know. Well, Placide says, speaking French like the body, and slow and heavy like he always says, he talks. I'm going to put her in the ground and bury her. Well, I say, we just bury her. And he turns around, he looks hard at the body, who said afterward there was a red light in Placide's eyes. You're going to help me bury her. And you're going to keep quiet all the rest of your life. Ain't you, Henry? Eh? Gulps the body. Hey, Placide says too. But he says it in a different way, and the veins kind of swelled up in his forehead, and he moved a step closer to the body. Yeah, agreed this Henry, swallowing hard. I'm going to help you bury her. Henry Labody's a little man, he knows it. And you're going to keep quiet, grits out Placide. And then another step closer. Oh, I'm going to keep quieter than that. The body's trying to swallow his tongue by this time, one supposes. And so Placide, him get out the spades, and they carried this woman out into the bushes away, off behind the shack, and they dug a deep hole. And the cat, that great beast, went along too, and spit and howled and tried to claw at Placide's legs. It hopped back and forth across the hole after they put Nita in it, and when we were ready to shovel the dirt on top of her, try as he would and did, and Placide couldn't kill it with his spade. What? Why, because he couldn't hit it, certainly. It dodged, you understand. Laborde says it faded from under the tool, and then there it was again, quick as a flash, just out of reach. Of course, Laborde's stupid. Likewise, he does not know. He does not always tell the truth, him. No, not even now that he's an old man who should be thinking seriously of his sins. However, I'm telling you what he said. Well, they buried Nita. They left the cat sitting on the grave. And afterward, Placide, he sent Laborde on his way, first giving him 2 great cups full of strong wine and growling a few more plain threats in his ear, both of which was to stiffen Henry's resolution. And then so Henry Laborde him go. Now Placide, you see, was not really a murderer, only a poor oaf with too much money and a wicked woman. If he had been a murderer, he would have tried to cover up his crime by killing Laborde too, But even this stupid Placide, he must have known that one hangs but once, regardless of how many times one kills. Probably he thought Laborde would keep quiet for a little while at least and give him time to get his money and escape. But Henry Laborde, him, stupid one, did not keep quiet. Well, not very long. He did not know how. He was also afraid, him. So Laborde went straight to the sheriff, and the sheriff, being an old man, sent his deputy, Sosten Lablou. No, not the one you know. This was his cousin, who talked only less than Laborde. And then Lablou, like he told others, and then several volunteered to go to Placide's place with him, and 1 or 2 saddled their horses, and they come along without even volunteering. And they passed by the peddlers on the way, and they paused long enough to wake him and tell him where they were going or why. The peddler climbed on his old nag without bothering to saddle it and came with him. Hello, Lucy. Now, it is some miles from La Branche to Placide's old cabin, but it's not a long ride for men on horseback, no. And Sosten Lablou and his posse were soon there, demanded an entrance. And there was a light inside the cabin when Lablou hammered on the door. After a moment, the door opened, and LeBleu had his pistol in his hand. It was a good thing he didn't have a hair trigger, because the deputy was so surprised when that door opened, he dropped the gun. You see, it was not Placide who opened the door. No, it was Nita. Why, she says. Nita couldn't speak French. Why, you want? Now, LeBleu, having come to arrest her murderer, now didn't really know what he wanted any more than she did. Why, ain't Placide killed you? He blurts out. Somebody laughed, which you can understand almost anyone would, and LeBleu says, embarrassed, I mean, where is this Placide? Inside. You come on in now, says Nita. Placide, him lying in the bed. He looked dully at LeBleu and the others, who noticed without thinking too much about it that there were several nasty marks on his face, like the claw marks of a beast, for instance, or of a woman. And there was a bandage around Nita's throat also. That much, at least, of Labori's story was true. Placide had hurled something at her throat. And, well, they would doubtless be thinking, after Nita got up. She scratched his face. Nothing strange about that. A man and his wife could fight if they wanted to, could they not? Naturally. Be a strange cause if they didn't. Too much wine. He's drunk, Nita snarls. He got with that Laborde and had a hand at me, they did. She shrugs her shoulder, which was to say, well, where's the newness in that? Oh, LeBleu says, as if comprehending much. So Laborde was drunk. I suppose I'll walk to town, sobered him up some, otherwise I haven't seen it myself. I was not drunk, Henry Laborde indignantly protests. Placide gave me only 2 cups of the wine before I left. 2 cups, no more. He points to a big cup which will hold about a pint. Everybody shouts and laughs. Laborde's one of those unfortunates who cannot take one drink without it affecting his already dizzy brain, so much as that's known to all. Somebody notices the paleness of Placide then. A pale souse. He must be very drunk and be in the habit of drinking very heavily in secret. Everyone had thought differently. Well. So they decided to go back to town. You will see that there is very little else they could do. This Nita, she not buried in the ground, she like they say. And they just a husband and a wife are fighting, like natural like. And besides, there was something about Nita made them all uncomfortable. And uneasy like, you know. Nita, she seemed changed in a way none of them could have a finger to it. And there were smoldering flames deep down in her slanting eyes, and there was something repulsive about the way she'd run her red, thin tongue over her red lips whenever she looked at them. As they were going, someone saw Nita slide up to the peddler, make a swift motion with her fingers, while it seemed she hissed a few words in a tongue strange to all the rest of them. But there was only one word could be understood and remembered. No, I do not know what it was. But they say it was afterwards said by another gypsy who was asked to mean gold or money, maybe. Later, too, one of those who saw or heard of it was inspired to show old Yellow Marie, as well as he could remember the sign he thought Nita made. And Marie, she laughed evilly. Being very drunken and high humor, Marie, she finally gave a sly hint that it might mean something like poison in a certain dark and secret language. Have I told you it was said by some that Marie engaged in darker practices than the keeping of her dive? Afterward, Marie tell Laborde and Nita probably was only fooling the peddler so as not to frighten him. And Placide added this, Marie did not die of poison. No, more than that, she would not say a word. Well, one guess as good as another, But they say there was a greedy look in the peddler's eyes as he listened to Nita. Perhaps there was a greedy look likewise in Nita's eyes. But not for gold, one thinks. Whatever it was, Nita said to the peddler, he went to LeBleu and the others when they rode back to town. And for 3 or 4 days afterward, this peddler was busy mending his horses, harnesses, and greasing his wagon. And he offered his stock of tinware at such cheap prices that he soon disposed of it all. Getting ready to move on, he said. The 3rd or 4th night, the gypsy, him disappeared. Nobody was sorry to see him go, nor felt slighted that he left without saying goodbye. And then a trapper stopped at Placide's cabin, discovered it was deserted except for Placide himself. Placide himself, who was dead, and therefore could hardly be said to count. He'd been dead for some days, and was being warm as the weather. He was beginning to be unpleasant about being dead, he was. There was a curious wound, or maybe several wounds in Placide's throat. Part of him looked to have been eaten by a beast. Well, they buried him quickly, they did. Now, I do not know what the coroner said about it, but other people lifted their eyebrows or shrugged, saying Placide died, or maybe this woman killed him, and the woman has run away with the peddler, after getting Placide's money. Ah, well, we're rid of the three of them, the peddler, Placide, and Placide's wife. None of them amounted to much anyway. Oddly enough, the peddler's horse was soon afterward found dead and partly devoured in a spot deep in the woods. The horse, mind ye. Yeah, people worried at that, naturally. And then one afternoon, about a month after Laborde swore he saw Placide murder Nita, this same Henry Laborde was back in the woods behind Placide's cabin when he came upon a mound of freshly turned dirt that excited his curiosity. The longer Laborde regarded the mound, the more excited he became. This looked suspiciously like a grave, and no human grave had the least right to be in that spot, that much he knew. No, it was a grave. And when Laborde, with the aid of a shovel which he ran and fetched from Placide's old cabin, finally overcame his indecision and dug into that ground, he found a man's body. And whose do you suppose it was? Ah, you're right, the peddler. What? Indeed not. This is the curious part of it. This peddler's body was not at all decomposed, and there was the same sort of wound or wounds in his throat that Placide had, and they were half healed, you see. Now, Henry Laborde, one can imagine, was knocking about the knees. It was getting dusk, and that made things worse. He had a reason enough to know that this body did not look as it ought to have looked, having been dead and covered with dirt. Whether it had been buried one day at 10, it looked too fresh. Fresh or not, it surely was not breathing. It was dead, and yet, it looked as if there might be warm blood beneath its skin. And then Laborde him leaned upon the wooden handle of the spade he had used, and which must have been cracked already for a snap beneath his weight. He was thrown off balance, and clutching the long handle of the spade tighter than ever, he stumbled forward onto the dry clods he'd dug from the grave, which rolled under his feet. He fell forward, you understand, and the spade handle thrust before him, and the sharp broken end of the handle, with Laborde's weight behind it, pierced the breast of the corpse at his feet. Now you remember, this is Laborde's tale. I'm only telling it for him, so. Well, this broken end of the spade handle, which was really a hardwood pole, was sharp and keen, and it penetrated the corpse about where its heart should be, and the corpse moved. The dead lips screamed, and then the eyes opened wide. Laborde swears to this, although if you ask him, he will deny it. They opened wide with such hate in them. But the fury swiftly faded into a look of great gladness, like the eyes of a bird suddenly set free of a cage. And the working features softened into a mask of peace and contentment. The eyes closed while the body watched the body began. The body began to mortify right before him. Henry Laborde, he ran to get out of that forest. It was getting dark with each second. He ran, too, to get away from that horror he'd come upon. And while he ran, it seemed that there was a patter of swift feet not far behind. Fear lent wings to his feet, as they say, until he came to the banks of the bayou upon which Placide's cabin stood. The woods did not come down quite to the bayou, where the land had been more or less cleared. It was lighter here, although the sun had sunk and the night was falling fast. Panting, Laborde stopped and looked back toward the trees. Running toward him from the forest was a woman, who slowed down to a walk as he looked, too tired and shocked already to feel much fresh surprise at her appearance there. She came closer, so he recognized her in the twilight. And who you think it was? Of course, it was Anita there. Laborde says she smiled at him. It was a sort of smile that made shivers crawl on that back of his. Good evening, he says. Remember that Nita did not speak French. He wondered why Nita was licking her red lips with her redder tongue. From the way he speaks of it when he will, one understands that Laborde did not care for this at all. He felt uneasy. It was so queer, you comprehend, when Nita did not answer, that not a word from her, just licking her lips and staring at him with that strange smile. Laborde, one assumes, was at a loss to understand the situation, the woman saying nothing and looking at him in a way that he did not at all care for. Finally, he tells her, I thought you run off with the peddler. Nita laughed. Laborde says he shivered at that sound. It was getting darker all the time, you see. Nita moved closer to him still, not making a sound beyond that one hellish laugh. The body watched her with a funny feeling in his flat stomach, and then he let out a yell, or one assumes he did, knowing this little body. He says that he was looking at the same eyes all the time, which one doubts because he does not like to look people in the eyes. But one minute they were the eyes of Nita, as he knew Nita. The next minute they're the eyes of, well, what do you think? The eyes of a great she-wolf. A great she-wolf with slavering jowls, a red tongue running out between the fangs that glinted faintly in the dusk. And this wolf, or whatever it was, it leaped at the body, who undoubtedly howled as much as any wolf as he also leaped backward into the bayou. Now only a very stupid one such as this would leap, unthinking and unlooking, where he knew he was standing on the bank of a bayou. Yet it may be that this stupidity saved the body from death, or worse. It struggled in the water while the wolf yarrowed and slavered on the bank. The body says its eyes were red as fire by this time, eh? Well, one knows without being told that a swamp rat like the body could swim, and the farther bank was not very distant. He climbed up upon it, and the wolf let out a last fiendish howl as Henry scampered off toward the branch. Wet and waking, feeling a certain need of stimulation, the body he scurried into the old Marie's place, wet clothes and all. One drink and what few brains the body had would run out of his mouth. However, if you understand me, he talked much when he drank a little. He talked to Marie, telling her of his finding the corpse that was so different from other corpses, and of his meeting with Nita, or the wolf, or both in one, or whatever it was, on the bank of the bayou there. And then he went back and he told her the whole story in detail, from the time he had seen Placide throw a needle to the floor and her other desecrated gree charm into her throat. Before he had finished, Marie was so shaken that she was drinking her own rock-gut liquor and pouring more for Henry, all without charge to him. "Hee," she moaned. "The black charm, the black cat is jumping across her body in the grave, licking her blood. The moonlight in her eyes while she's lying in the grave. Oh, Placide, oh, stupid old Placide. Why did you not drive a stake through her heart when you had her buried her?" "Hey," said Henry Laborde, "what's all this you're talking about?" "Loup-garou! Loup-garou!" snarled Marie, who was raised among people who speak French much better than and in preference to English. She had absorbed all the folklore of those French-descended people. Marie's white blood, one assumes, came from the same source as theirs. "Loup-garou!" shuddered Laborde. "You comprehend that is the French name for a werewolf, so?" "I was afraid so, me." Marie brightens after a minute. "Well, one good thing," she exults. "This Nita cannot get off her island. No, she can't leave the island, and I'm not going there. Me, I don't intend to see her." Now, as you already know, La Branche Bayou forks and flows into the bay into two separate streams, like a wishbone, making an island nearly 15 miles long and about 10 miles wide at the bay end. The point, you understand, is that the werewolf is supposed to be unable to be crossed in running water, just like the vampire, too. And this loup-garou, which is, or was, Nita, is safely in a pen, then, unless you can net someone to carry her across the bayou in his arms, which I doubt. Now, there's only a little more to tell. Laborde, at Marie's urging, went with his tale to Father Solon. The peddler sexton went into the woods and cut off the spade handle a little way above the peddler's body, after which he drove the end of the handle a little more firmly into the corpse, I think, and he covered it up to rest in peace. Now, of course, that left Placide to be looked after. The sexton sharpened the part of the spade handle that he kept, and he dealt with Placide as the peddler had been dealt with. And Placide's wounds, too, had been healed right there in the grave, although they had been greater by far than the peddler's. And him screamed and squirmed beneath the thrust of the stake, even though he be dead days, and settled back at peace finally, as the peddler had done. The sexton piled the dirt back on what had become in a twinkling a heap of bones and unpleasantness. "And so," Delacroix concluded with a shrug of his shoulders, "that is the tale as I heard it. It happened as so they say when I was a boy. I did not live in the parish then. Father Soul had been these 4 years past, so you could not ask him." "Him did. Me, I don't know." I drew in my pipe for a couple of minutes, considering Delacroix's tale the while. Finally, I asked, "What do you mean by saying you don't know? You don't believe any of that, do you?" Delacroix merely gave a repetition of his frequent and non-committal shrug, and I knew that for all his better education and larger contact with the world, he would be as taciturn as any of his ilk when conversation took a turn he did not like. I was sleepy by this time, and I smothered a yawn. "All right," I laughed. I'm going on over to my tent and turn in. I hope none of those werewolves who have to lie in their graves between sunup and sundown have come to life tonight to catch me on the way or come uninvited into my tent. The con I enter your house without an invitation, Delacroix rejoined in all seriousness, and one supposes that will apply to a tent likewise, so, once you're inside, you'll be safe, yeah. I was tempted to laugh at his earnestness, but I had no wish to wound his sensibilities, and so refrained. Perhaps after all, he says, it would be better if you were to sleep at my home while you're here, yes? No, I carelessly shook my head. I'll go over. At this moment I broke off, as there came a light tapping upon the door of the shack. To this day I did not know why one of us did not say, "Come in." Instead, Delacroix, who was sitting close to the door, merely reached out and lifted the latch, the poorly hung door swinging inward of its own accord. At that, surprise kept either one of us from speaking for a minute, although I had sufficient presence of mind to rise from my seat upon the cracker box and say, "Good evening." As he standing just outside the doorway, framed in the light from within, was one of the most beautiful women, she was apparently a little more than a girl, that I have ever seen. She was clad in rough, serviceable corduroy riding breeches and flannel shirt, and I could see a laced boot on the one leg that the shadows failed to screen from my view. Even though she was so clad, I write these next words with considerable deliberateness. Even though she was so clad in garments that she could have obtained from any chance hunter in the swamps around us, provided he were of a slight stature, even I say, though she was clad in such garments as these, there was no hiding the alluring femininity of her. Before I could find wits and voice to speak to this astonishing apparition, the girl smiled and herself spoke, dashing my illusions. Her words, although there was an additional odd inflection, were the words of an unlettered Cajun girl of the swamp country. "My car," she informed us, "is bogged down on the other side of the bayou, and my ankle, I sprained it trying to get out. Will you gentlemen help me?" However, if her words were crude, her voice was not. There was a wistful note in it that touched me. I could see now that she was leaning heavily on a stick, and the boot had been removed from one stockingless foot. She moved the foot as if to ease the pain, and so that it was more in the light. I'd been out in the swamps with a road camp for 2 long months, and a Cajun or no Cajun, this was a woman, and a beautiful woman at that, as Delacroix would put it. Well, certainly we'll help you. I was very gallant about it, hoping that she would not be too fastidious to overlook my 2 days' growth of beard. I had another thought, bold but maybe, and I said, I see you cannot stand upon that foot, I'll carry you back across the bridge. I stared at the look of wild exultation that leapt into that girl's wonderful eyes, enchanting with their vague suggestion of the Orient before she dropped her gaze. "No," Delacroix, to my utter astonishment and indignation. "Carry across the running water. No, never. You don't be doing that." My anger was flaring swiftly, and then I caught sight of the girl. I stopped the hot rejoinder I had upon my tongue for Delacroix, appalled with doubt and something more. There was a positively feral light in those glorious eyes now, and that seductive mouth had ceased to be such. "Landry," Delacroix was yelling, "bring your gun! The one with the silver bullets! She's here! She's here! Get the gun! Get the bullets!" The girl leaped away toward the swamp growth. There was no sign of lameness in her as she ran. I had a vague, confused impression that she looked oddly inhuman and dropped to all fours as she reached the shelter of the forest. Old Landry, he of the withered face and gnarled hands who had first mentioned Placide's wife that night, came running up. There was a huge revolver in one of those knotted fists. Delacroix spoke to him in the French patois of the region, of which I knew enough to get the gist. "Yes, it was a she, but you are too late. She has reached the woods you dare not follow. She and her pack would have your throat open before you knew they were near." "Silver bullets!" Yes, that was all I could understand of Landry's answer. Silver bullets, taut as it was with suppressed emotion. Then hoarsely, which occurred, the words, "My son," he croaked something else. Delacroix shook his head. Avenge him and all the others when the odds are even. Wait until you have another chance out in the open." 11 years, said Landry, quite distinctly. "For so long have I carried this gun loaded with silver bullets, blessed by the good Father, the only kind that can kill them. Waiting to use it." Again Delacroix shook his head. "It would be 5 or 6 months getting the road across the island. There'll be other chances. You have waited 11 years. You can surely wait a few months longer." Don't be going out there now, fool. Delacroix slowly shut the door, and Landry plodded back to resume his disturbed rest. Perhaps. You will sleep here tonight, was a simple statement, simply made. I nodded just as simply. Then once more, I felt a shiver run along my spine. From the forest again came that fiendish ululation, the baffled howl of Placide's wife.